The gunshot echoed through the canyon just as the sun began its descent behind the jagged rocks, and Wade Dalton spurred his horse faster toward the sound, not knowing that everything he believed about himself was about to shatter like glass against stone. He had been tracking the cattle rustlers for 3 days across the unforgiving Texas landscape, following their trail from Fort Stockton through the twisting passages of the surrounding canyonlands. Wade Dalton was known throughout Pecos County as the hardest man anyone had ever met. At 28 years old, he had built a reputation that preceded him like thunder before a storm. He never smiled, never showed mercy to outlaws, and most importantly, never cried. Not when his father died from a rattlesnake bite when Wade was 19. Not when he watched his best friend get trampled by a spooked herd 2 summers ago. Not ever. His steel-gray eyes remained dry and cold as the winter wind that swept across the plains each December. The year was 1878, and Texas was still wild enough that a man could disappear into the vast stretches of desert and scrubland without anyone finding him for weeks. Wade preferred it that way. He worked as a ranch foreman for the Double R Ranch, managing 200 head of cattle and a crew of 12 men who respected him but never claimed to understand him. They said Wade Dalton had ice water in his veins instead of blood. As his buckskin gelding rounded the bend in the canyon, Wade pulled hard on the reins. The scene before him made his hand instinctively move to the Colt revolver on his hip. A wagon sat overturned, one wheel still spinning slowly in the late afternoon light. Supplies were scattered across the dusty ground, flour sacks torn open and creating white patches against the red earth. 2 horses lay dead in their traces, and the acrid smell of gunpowder still hung in the air. But what captured Wade's attention completely was the figure slumped against a boulder 20 feet from the wreckage. Even from this distance, he could see the dark stain spreading across the pale blue fabric of a woman's dress. Wade dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the ground hard as he ran toward her. His mind cataloged details with practiced efficiency. The wagon belonged to a merchant, based on the goods scattered around. The woman appeared young, maybe early 20s. 3 men had been here, based on the hoof prints. They had ridden off heading northeast, probably an hour ago. Then he reached her, and all his cold efficiency evaporated like morning dew under the brutal Texas sun. She was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Auburn hair fell in waves around her shoulders, darkened in places by blood. Her face was pale, lips colorless, but her features were delicate and perfectly formed. Her green eyes were half open, struggling to focus on him as he dropped to his knees beside her. Blood soaked the left side of her dress, just below her ribs, and more blood had pooled in the dust beneath her. "Please," she whispered, the word barely audible. "Help me." Wade's hands moved without conscious thought, pressing against the wound to slow the bleeding. The fabric was warm and wet beneath his palms. "Who did this to you?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. 3 men. "Stopped the wagon. My father, he tried to fight them." Her eyes moved toward the wagon, and Wade understood without her saying more. Whoever her father had been, he was probably lying somewhere Wade had not looked yet. "They took everything, shot me when I screamed. Do not talk. Save your strength." Wade stripped off his leather vest and then his cotton shirt, wadding the shirt against her wound. The bleeding was bad, worse than anything he had seen in a while. The bullet had entered below her ribcage on the left side, and he could not tell if it had gone through or was still lodged inside her. Either way, she was losing blood fast. Something strange was happening in Wade's chest. It felt like his ribs were tightening, making it hard to breathe. His hands trembled as he applied pressure to her wound, and when she gasped in pain, the sound cut through him like a knife. "What is your name?" He needed to keep her talking, keep her conscious. Catherine Zimmerman." Each word seemed to cost her enormous effort. "Everyone calls me Kate. Kate, I am Wade Dalton. You are going to be fine. I am going to get you back to Fort Stockton to Dr. Morrison. He will fix you up." The words sounded hollow even to his own ears. Fort Stockton was 15 miles away, and the sun would be down in less than 2 hours. She would never survive that journey, not bleeding like this. Kate's hand moved weakly, her fingers brushing against his wrist. Her skin was cold despite the heat of the day. "I do not think I am going to make it." And that was when it happened. Wade felt something hot and unfamiliar burning behind his eyes. His vision blurred, and for the first time in his 28 years, for the first time since he was a small child before memory truly took hold, tears spilled down his weathered cheeks. "No." The word came out broken, desperate. "No, Kate, you have to stay. Please stay with me." He pressed harder against her wound, his tears falling onto his hands, mixing with her blood. "Please, Kate, do not leave. I just found you." The words made no sense. He had known her for all of 5 minutes. But something fundamental had shifted inside him the moment he saw her. Like a lock he did not know existed, had suddenly clicked open in his chest. Kate's eyes widened slightly as she saw the tears streaming down his face. Her cold hand moved to touch his cheek, her fingers trembling. "You are crying for me, a stranger. Stay with me." Wade could barely speak past the tightness in his throat. "Please, Kate, stay." He had never begged for anything in his life. Pride was something Wade wore like armor, keeping the world at a safe distance. But pride meant nothing now, not with this woman dying in his arms. He would beg, plead, promise anything if it meant those green eyes kept looking at him. "I am scared," she whispered. I know you are scared, but I am right here." Wade shifted, supporting her against his chest while maintaining pressure on the wound with one hand. "I am not going anywhere. You are not alone." He needed to think clearly, needed to push past the panic flooding his system. The bullet had to come out and the wound had to be closed. 15 miles to Fort Stockton might as well be 100 in her condition, which meant he had to do this himself, right here, right now. The thought of causing her more pain made his stomach turn, but leaving the bullet inside would kill her just as surely as the blood loss. "Kate, listen to me. I need to get the bullet out. It is going to hurt, but it is the only way." His voice steadied as he forced himself back into control. "Can you be strong for me?" She nodded weakly, her eyes fixed on his face. "Will you keep talking to me? I do not want to die in silence." "You are not going to die." Wade laid her gently back against the boulder and moved quickly to his horse. From his saddlebags he pulled out a bottle of whiskey, a clean cloth, his knife, and a small sewing kit. His hands still shook, but his training took over. He had done field medicine before, patched up ranch hands after accidents. This was just another wound. Except it was not, because this was Kate, and the thought of her dying made something inside him want to howl like a wounded animal. He knelt beside her again and uncorked the whiskey with his teeth. "Drink some of this first, as much as you can." Kate took several swallows, coughing at the burn. Wade watched her throat work as she drank, memorizing every detail of her face like he might never get another chance. When she finished, he took a long drink himself, needing the false courage. "Tell me about yourself, Wade Dalton." Kate's voice was faint, but she was trying to stay present, trying to focus on something besides the pain. Wade poured whiskey over his knife blade and the wound, making her cry out. His jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. "Not much to tell. I work at the Double R Ranch outside Fort Stockton, been there 9 years. He positioned the knife, steadying himself. "This is going to hurt badly. Hold onto my arm if you need to." He had to work fast. The bullet had entered at an angle, which might mean it missed vital organs, but it also meant digging for it would cause more damage. Kate's fingers dug into his forearm as he began to probe the wound, and her screams echoed off the canyon walls. Tears poured down Wade's face as he worked, his vision blurring so badly he had to keep blinking to see. "Almost there. Almost got it, Kate. Stay with me, stay with me." He kept talking, kept her grounded in his voice. His fingers found something hard and relief flooded through him. Using the knife as carefully as possible, he worked the bullet free. It fell to the ground with a small clink, covered in blood. Kate had gone limp against the boulder, her breathing shallow and rapid. Wade grabbed the clean cloth, folded it into a pad and pressed it against the entry wound. Then he gently turned her to check for an exit wound. There was none, which meant all the damage was internal. He could only pray nothing vital had been hit. Working quickly, he threaded a needle from the sewing kit. His hands had steadied now that he had a task to focus on. "Stay with me, Kate. I am almost done." The stitches were crude but functional, closing the wound as best he could. Each pull of the thread made him wince in sympathy, even though Kate was beyond feeling it now, having passed into unconsciousness. When he finished, he bandaged the wound with strips torn from his extra shirt, wrapping them around her slender torso. Then there was nothing left to do but wait. Wade gathered Kate into his arms and carried her to a more sheltered spot near the canyon wall, where an overhang would provide shade and protection. He laid out his bedroll and settled her onto it, covering her with his jacket. He built a small fire as the sun set, more for comfort than warmth in the lingering heat of the Texas evening. For the first time, he had a chance to survey the rest of the scene. He found Kate's father 50 yards from the wagon, shot 3 times. The man was maybe 50 years old, well dressed like a merchant. Wade took the time to bury him properly, digging a grave in the hard earth by firelight, marking it with stones. Kate would want to know her father had been treated with respect. Through the night, Wade sat beside Kate, changing the bandages when blood seeped through, dribbling water between her lips when she stirred, monitoring her breathing and her pulse. He talked to her even though she could not hear him, his voice low and constant in the darkness. "I do not know what is happening to me," he admitted to her sleeping form. "I have never felt anything like this. Seeing you hurt, seeing you bleed, it broke something inside me. Or maybe it fixed something that was broken all along. I have spent 10 years being hard, being cold, because I thought that was what strength looked like. But maybe I was just afraid of feeling anything because feeling something means it can hurt you." He took her hand, careful of the cuts and scrapes on her palms. Her fingers were delicate in his work-roughened hands. "You have to live, Kate. You have to make it through this because I need to know you. I need to hear your voice when you are not in pain. I need to see you smile. I need to know everything about you, who you are, what you love, what makes you laugh. Please, Kate, please stay." The night stretched endlessly. Wade dozed in short intervals, jerking awake at every sound, every change in Kate's breathing. His eyes were gritty with exhaustion and the salt of dried tears. The tracks on his cheeks felt like brands, evidence of his transformation from the man he had been into someone he did not recognize yet. As dawn broke over the canyon, painting the rocks in shades of pink and gold, Kate's eyes fluttered open. She looked disoriented at first, then her gaze found Wade's face. A ghost of a smile touched her pale lips. "You are still here," she whispered. Wade's throat tightened. "I told you I was not going anywhere. I heard you, during the night. I heard your voice." Her words were slow, each one carefully formed. "It kept pulling me back. Every time I started to drift away, I heard you and followed the sound." He could not speak past the emotion choking him. Instead, he brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture surprised him as much as it probably surprised her. Wade Dalton did not make tender gestures, except apparently he did now. "How do you feel?" he finally managed to ask. "Like I was shot." Kate's attempt at humor made his heart clench. But alive, incredibly, impossibly alive. "I removed the bullet, stitched you up as best I could, but you need a real doctor, Kate. We need to get you to Fort Stockton." Wade assessed her condition with a critical eye. Her color was slightly better, though still too pale. The bleeding had slowed significantly. She might incredibly survive this. "My father." The hope and dread in her eyes told him she already knew the answer. "I am sorry. I buried him properly." "We can have a minister say words over him when you are stronger." Tears slipped down Kate's temples, and Wade gently wiped them away. "He was a good man. We were bringing supplies from San Antonio to Fort Stockton. He had a store there, wanted to expand. It was supposed to be an adventure." "Tell me about him." Wade helped her sip water from his canteen. So she did. Through the morning, as Wade prepared for the journey to Fort Stockton, Kate talked about her father, Herman Zimmerman, about how he had raised her alone after her mother died of fever when Kate was 10. About the general store they had run together in San Antonio, how he had taught her to read and write and calculate figures faster than most men. About his dream of opening a second location in the growing town of Fort Stockton. "He wanted me to have opportunities," Kate said softly. "Wanted me to inherit a successful business so I would never have to depend on anyone." Wade rigged a travois behind his horse, padding it with everything soft he could salvage from the wagon. Moving Kate onto it made her gasp in pain, fresh blood seeping through the bandages, but there was no alternative. He needed to get her to Dr. Morrison. The journey took 6 hours, with frequent stops to check Kate's wound and let his horse rest. Wade walked beside the travois the entire way, keeping a hand on Kate's shoulder, maintaining that physical connection. He talked to her constantly, keeping her engaged and awake. He learned that she was 23 years old, had never been married, though several men in San Antonio had offered. She loved books, especially poetry, and could quote entire passages from memory. She was afraid of snakes but not spiders. She made the best apple pie in Texas, according to her father. Her birthday was in April. She had always wanted to see the ocean but never had the chance. And with every detail he learned, Wade fell deeper into something he had no name for. This was not the casual interest he had felt for saloon girls or the passing attraction to pretty faces. This was fundamental, like discovering he had been living his entire life as only half a person and Kate somehow made him whole. Fort Stockton appeared in the distance, the cluster of buildings shimmering in the heat. Wade's relief was overwhelming. They had made it. Dr. Joshua Morrison was a practical man in his 50s who had seen every kind of injury the frontier could produce. He took one look at Kate on the travois and immediately directed Wade to carry her into his office behind the general medical practice. Set her on the table. Gently now. Morrison was already washing his hands, rolling up his sleeves. His eyes took in Wade's appearance, the bloodstains covering his clothes, the exhaustion in his face. "Who worked on her?" "I did. Last night in the canyon. Removed the bullet, closed the wound best I could." Wade laid Kate down carefully, his hand lingering on her shoulder. Morrison nodded approvingly as he examined the stitching. "You did good work. Probably saved her life." He began unwrapping the bandages. "Now let me see what we are dealing with." Wade stood against the wall, unable to leave but trying to stay out of the way. His fists clenched every time Kate made a sound of pain. Morrison worked efficiently, cleaning the wound properly, checking for signs of infection, redressing it with professional supplies. She was lucky, Morrison finally announced. Bullet missed everything vital. Lots of damage to muscle and tissue, but nothing that will not heal given time and rest. She will need to stay completely still for at least 2 weeks. No riding, no walking, barely any sitting up. And she will need someone to care for her, change the bandages, make sure infection does not set in. I will do it. Wade spoke without thinking. Morrison raised an eyebrow. You have a ranch to run, Dalton. I will send word to the Double R. They can manage without me for a few weeks. Wade moved closer to the table, looking down at Kate's pale face. She does not have anyone else here. He can stay at my boarding house, a new voice said from the doorway. Mrs. Sarah Fletcher, a widow who ran the cleanest boarding house in Fort Stockton, stood with her hands on her ample hips. I heard you brought in a wounded woman, Wade Dalton. Poor dear needs a proper place to recover, and I've got a ground floor room that would work perfect. You can have the room next door. Wade could have kissed the interfering old busybody. Thank you, Mrs. Fletcher. Do not thank me yet. You will be doing all the nursing while I supervise to make sure everything stays proper and decent. Cannot have unmarried folks sharing rooms, even with one of them half dead. Over the next 2 weeks, Wade learned patience he never knew he possessed. He set up in Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house, sending word to the Double R that he was taking personal time. His foreman, a capable man named Joe Russell, sent back confirmation that everything was under control and to take all the time he needed. Every day, Wade sat beside Kate's bed, helping her eat, reading to her from books borrowed from the minister's small library, talking to her for hours. He changed her bandages under Mrs. Fletcher's watchful eye, his touch gentle despite his calloused hands. He learned the exact angle to prop the pillows so she could sit up without pulling her stitches. He discovered she liked her coffee with 2 spoons of sugar and just a splash of milk. Kate, for her part, seemed fascinated by him. Tell me more about growing up on a ranch, she would say. Or what is it like chasing cattle rustlers? Or why did you become so hard before you found me? That last question came on the 8th day. Wade was sitting in the chair beside her bed, whittling a piece of wood into the shape of a bird. His hands needed something to do during the long hours. He considered deflecting, making a joke, changing the subject. But Kate deserved honesty. My mother left when I was 7, just walked away one day and never came back. My father raised me alone, but he was a hard man, bitter about being abandoned. He taught me that feelings made you weak, that caring about people just gave them power to hurt you. When he died, I decided he was right. I locked everything down inside, told myself being alone and hard was the same as being strong. Kate's hand reached for his, her fingers threading through his. And now I know he was wrong. Feeling things does not make you weak. That night in the canyon, when I thought I was going to lose you, the pain almost destroyed me. But I would not trade it for anything, Kate, because feeling that pain meant I was alive in a way I have never been before. You woke something in me that I thought was dead. Her green eyes shimmered with tears. Wade, I need to tell you something. I am falling in love with you. I know it is crazy. We have only known each other such a short time, but I cannot help it. You saved my life. You cried for me when I was a stranger. You have taken care of me with such tenderness. How could I not love you? Wade set down his whittling and moved to sit on the edge of her bed, careful not to jostle her. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. Kate, I fell in love with you the moment I saw you. I just did not understand what it was until later. I have never believed in fate or destiny or anything like that, but you were meant to be mine. I know that as surely as I know my own name. Then kiss me, Wade Dalton. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but her eyes never wavered. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and careful, mindful of her injury but full of promise. Kate sighed against his mouth, her uninjured hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling his heart hammer beneath her palm. When they broke apart, Wade pressed his forehead against hers. "Marry me, Kate. I know it is too soon. I know I should court you properly, but I cannot stand the thought of ever being without you. Marry me and I will spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." "Yes." Kate's answer came without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you, Mrs." Fletcher, who had definitely been listening at the door, burst into the room with a delighted clap. "Oh, how wonderful! A wedding to plan. But not until this girl is properly healed, you hear me, Wade Dalton. I will not have a bride fainting at her own ceremony." It took 4 more weeks before Dr. Morrison declared Kate healed enough to resume normal activities, though she would carry the scar for the rest of her life. Wade did not leave her side except for brief trips to the Double R to check on things and make arrangements. He learned that Kate was incredibly strong, both physically and mentally. She mourned her father deeply, but did not let the grief consume her. She insisted on going through the salvaged goods from the wagon, determined to understand what her father had invested in for his new store. "He put everything into this venture," she told Wade one afternoon, surrounded by invoices and inventory lists. "I want to honor his dream. Open the store here in Fort Stockton like he planned." Wade helped her sort through the finances, impressed by her business acumen. She knew exactly what each item was worth, what would sell well, what to order more of. Together they made plans, Kate directing and Wade providing muscle and connections in town. The store opened 3 months after that day in the canyon. It was a modest establishment on Main Street, but well-stocked and organized. Kate named it Zimmerman's General Store, hanging a sign painted with her father's name. On opening day, she stood beside Wade in the doorway, greeting customers and taking orders like she had been doing it her whole life. Which Wade supposed she had. They were married on a Saturday afternoon in October, with half the town in attendance. Kate wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Mrs. Fletcher and 3 other ladies had spent weeks sewing. Wade wore a new suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his boots polished to a shine. He felt like an imposter in the fancy clothes, but the look on Kate's face when she saw him made every uncomfortable moment worth it. Reverend Thomas performed the ceremony in the small church at the edge of town. When it came time for the vows, Wade's voice was strong and clear, no hesitation, no doubt. "I promise to love you every day for the rest of my life, to protect you, to support you, to cry with you and laugh with you. You made me human again, Kate. You made me whole." Kate's vows were equally heartfelt. "I promise to build a life with you, to stand beside you in every storm, to love you in the quiet moments and the loud ones. You saved my life, Wade, and I give that life to you freely and completely." When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Wade kissed Kate with such tenderness that several ladies in the congregation sniffled into their handkerchiefs. Mrs. Fletcher outright wept. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing and more food than Wade had ever seen in one place. He danced with his bride, holding her close and marveling at how perfectly she fit in his arms. This was what he had been missing his entire life, this feeling of belonging, of home. They spent their wedding night in a room at the boarding house that Mrs. Fletcher had decorated with flowers and candles. Wade carried Kate over the threshold, then set her down gently, suddenly nervous despite everything they had been through together. Kate reached up and touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. Everything is so right it scares me." Wade caught her hand, kissing her palm. I keep thinking I am going to wake up and find this was all a dream. Then let me prove it is real. Kate began unbuttoning his shirt, her fingers deft despite the trembling. Love me, Wade. Show me this is real. And he did, with a tenderness and passion that left them both breathless and tangled in the sheets. Wade had been with women before, quick encounters that meant nothing and were forgotten by morning. But this was entirely different. This was sacred, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with bodies and everything to do with souls. Afterwards, as Kate dozed against his chest, Wade stared at the ceiling and let himself feel the full weight of his happiness. It was almost overwhelming, this feeling of completeness. His hand rested on the scar below her ribs, that permanent reminder of how close he had come to losing her before he ever really had her. I love you, he whispered into her hair. I love you so much it terrifies me. Kate stirred, pressing a kiss to his chest. I love you too. Now sleep, husband. We have the rest of our lives ahead of us. The rest of their lives began in earnest the next day. Wade moved into Kate's rooms above the general store, bringing his few possessions with him. It was strange at first, living in town instead of at the ranch, but he quickly adapted. He kept his position as foreman at the Double R, riding out each day to manage the operations, but he always came home to Kate in the evenings. Home. The word meant something now. The store thrived under Kate's management. She had a gift for understanding what people needed and making them feel welcome. Wade helped where he could, using his connections to negotiate better prices with suppliers, handling the heavy lifting, dealing with difficult customers who thought they could take advantage of a woman. One such customer made that mistake exactly once. A drifter tried to intimidate Kate into giving him supplies on credit he clearly had no intention of paying back. Wade happened to walk in just as the man grabbed Kate's arm roughly. The drifter found himself on the floor 3 seconds later, Wade's boot on his chest and cold fury in his eyes. You do not touch my wife. You do not raise your voice to her. You do not even look at her wrong. Are we clear? The drifter nodded frantically. Wade led him up and personally escorted him out of town with a clear message not to return. Kate scolded him for being overprotective, but she was smiling when she did it. I can handle myself, you know. I know. But you do not have to, not anymore. Wade pulled her close, mindful of customers in the store but unable to resist kissing the top of her head. Let me protect you, Kate. It makes me feel useful. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The seasons turned, bringing the cooler winds of winter and then the blooming warmth of spring. Kate discovered she was pregnant in March, and Wade celebrated by building a cradle with his own hands, carving intricate patterns of horses and cattle into the wood. What if I am not ready to be a mother? Kate asked one night as they lay in bed, her hand resting on the small swell of her belly. Wade's hand covered hers. Then we will figure it out together. You are going to be amazing, Kate. You are strong and smart and kind. Our child is lucky to have you. Our child is lucky to have both of us. Kate turned to face him in the darkness. You are going to be a wonderful father, Wade. Nothing like your own father. You know how to love now. That is the most important thing. Their son was born on a sweltering day in September 1879, after a labor that had Wade pacing holes in the floor downstairs, while Dr. Morrison and Mrs. Fletcher attended to Kate. When he was finally allowed in the room, Wade approached the bed like he was approaching something holy. Kate looked exhausted but radiant, her hair damp with sweat, her face glowing with tired joy. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. Come meet your son. Kate's voice was hoarse but happy. Wade sat carefully on the edge of the bed, looking down at the impossibly small face peeking out of the blanket. His son. He had a son. The wave of emotion that crashed over him was even stronger than what he had felt that day in the canyon. This was his child, his and Kate's, a whole new person made from their love. "He is perfect," Wade managed to say, his voice breaking. Tears streamed freely down his face for the second time in his life, but these were tears of pure joy. "You want to hold him." Kate carefully transferred the baby into Wade's arms, showing him how to support the tiny head. Wade had handled newborn calves and colts, but this was entirely different. His son weighed almost nothing, a warm and precious bundle that immediately wrapped around Wade's heart. The baby opened his eyes, dark blue and unfocused, and made a small sound. "Hello there," Wade whispered. "I am your father. I am going to teach you everything I know, how to ride, how to rope cattle, how to be strong but gentle, and I am going to love you every single day, I promise you that." They named him Henry Wade Dalton, and from the moment he entered the world, he had both his parents completely devoted to him. Wade discovered that fatherhood suited him in ways he never expected. He was patient with the sleepless nights, happy to walk the floor with a crying baby, eager to be involved in every aspect of Henry's care. Kate watched her hard cowboy husband coo over their son and melt into a puddle of affection every time Henry grabbed his finger, and she fell even more deeply in love with him. The years that followed were full and rich. The general store continued to prosper, becoming a cornerstone of the Fort Stockton community. Wade eventually left his position at the Double R to focus on expanding the store and investing in other business ventures. He and Kate became respected pillars of the growing town, known for their fairness and generosity. Henry grew into a bright, energetic boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's stubborn determination. When he was 3, Kate became pregnant again, giving birth to a daughter they named Sarah Louise in 1882. Sarah had Wade's gray eyes and Kate's auburn hair and a temper that kept both her parents on their toes. Wade discovered that being a father to a daughter was both terrifying and wonderful. He was fiercely protective of Sarah, but Kate kept him in check, reminding him that their daughter needed room to grow and explore just like Henry did. On quiet evenings, after the children were asleep and the store was closed, Wade and Kate would sit together on the porch of the home they had built just outside town. It was a solid house of wood and stone, with enough land for a garden and a few horses. Wade had built most of it himself, pouring his love into every board and nail. "Do you ever think about that day in the canyon?" Kate asked one such evening, her head resting on Wade's shoulder as they watched the sun set over the Texas landscape. "Every single day." Wade's arm tightened around her. "I think about how close I came to losing you before I ever knew you, how my whole life changed in the span of an hour. Do you regret it, giving up the hard cowboy reputation, everyone knowing that you cry and feel things and love your family more than anything?" Kate tilted her head to look up at him. Wade turned to meet her eyes, his hand coming up to cup her face in that familiar gesture. "I regret nothing. You gave me the greatest gift anyone has ever given me, Kate. You gave me permission to be human, to feel everything deeply and completely. I am not afraid of tears anymore because they mean I have something worth crying over. I have you. I have our children. I have a life full of love and meaning. How could I possibly regret any of that?" Kate kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of the promise of more years together. "I love you, Wade Dalton, my hard cowboy who learned to cry. I love you more than I have words to say, Catherine Dalton. You saved me just as much as I saved you that day." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they sat together in comfortable silence, hands entwined, hearts beating in sync. The Wild West was slowly being tamed around them, towns growing larger, railroads expanding, the frontier shrinking year by year. But here, in this moment, they had carved out their own piece of paradise. Wade thought about the man he used to be, cold and closed off, convinced that hardness was strength and emotion was weakness. That man seemed like a stranger now, someone from a different lifetime. The Wade Dalton who existed now knew that true strength came from loving deeply, despite the risk of loss. From opening your heart, even though it could be broken. From allowing yourself to cry when something mattered enough. Inside the house, Henry called out in his sleep, and Wade rose to check on him, Kate following close behind. They stood together in the doorway of their children's room, watching Henry and Sarah sleep in their small beds, chests rising and falling with peaceful breaths. "They are growing up so fast," Kate whispered. "Too fast." Wade wrapped his arms around his wife from behind, resting his chin on the top of her head. "But we will treasure every moment. That is what life is about, is it not? Treasuring the moments we have with the people we love." Over the following years, Wade and Kate watched Fort Stockton transform from a rough frontier town into a thriving community. They expanded the general store twice, eventually employing 6 people to help manage the inventory and sales. Wade invested wisely in land and livestock, building a modest fortune that would secure their children's futures. Henry grew into a capable young man who inherited his father's sense of honor and his mother's business sense. At 18, he was already helping manage the store and talking about opening a branch in San Angelo. Sarah, at 15, was the smartest student her teachers had ever seen, already discussing the possibility of attending a teacher's college in the East. Wade was 46 years old the day Kate found him standing at the gravesite he had carved out for her father all those years ago. They had eventually erected a proper headstone, and Kate visited regularly to leave flowers and tell Herman about his grandchildren. "He would have been so proud of them," Kate said, slipping her hand into Wade's. Her auburn hair was threaded with silver now, and fine lines crinkled around her eyes when she smiled. But to Wade she was just as beautiful as the day he found her bleeding in that canyon. "He would have been proud of you," Wade corrected. "Building the business he dreamed of, raising such incredible children, becoming the heart of this community. You honored his memory in every way that matters." They stood together in silence for a moment. Then Kate spoke again. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if those rustlers had taken a different path that day? If you had not been tracking them through that particular canyon?" Wade considered the question seriously. "I try not to. The thought of a world where I never found you, where I never learned to feel and love and cry, that is a world I do not want to imagine. Even though it meant you suffering, even though it meant nearly losing you, I cannot regret the path that led us to each other." "Neither can I." Kate turned to face him fully. "You know what I remember most about that day? Not the pain or the fear, though those were real. I remember opening my eyes and seeing this hard, dangerous-looking man kneeling beside me with tears pouring down his face, begging me not to die. I remember thinking that anyone who could feel that deeply for a stranger was someone worth living for." Wade pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the solid reality of her in his arms. "You are my whole world, Kate, you and the children. Everything that matters to me fits right here in this town." As they walked back toward their home, hands linked and steps matched, Wade reflected on the incredible journey of his life. The hard cowboy who never cried had been transformed by love into a man who felt everything deeply. He was not ashamed of his tears anymore, not embarrassed by the tender emotions that overwhelmed him when he watched his children or held his wife. That evening, the whole family gathered for supper in the dining room Wade had built with his own hands. Henry talked about his plans for the San Angelo store. Sarah argued passionately about women's rights to education, making both her parents proud even as she challenged their thinking. Kate served the meal she had prepared, her laughter ringing out at Wade's terrible jokes. And Wade sat at the head of the table, looking around at these people who made up his entire universe, and felt his eyes grow wet with gratitude. When Kate caught his eye and smiled knowingly, he did not look away or pretend the tears were not there. He let them fall freely, because these tears were precious. They were evidence of a life fully lived, of a heart that had learned to love without restraint. After supper, after the children had gone to their own pursuits and the house had grown quiet, Wade and Kate prepared for bed in the room they had shared for 18 years. The routine was comfortable and familiar, but no less intimate for its familiarity. As they lay together in the darkness, Kate's head on Wade's chest, his hand stroking her hair, she spoke softly. "Promise me something. Anything. Promise me that no matter how many years we have left, you will never stop being the man who cried for me in that canyon. The man who was not afraid to feel everything, to love without holding back. That is the man I fell in love with, and that is the man I want to grow old beside." Wade pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "That is the easiest promise I have ever made." "I could not go back to being cold and hard even if I wanted to, Kate. You changed me fundamentally, down to the very core of who I am. The man who never cried died in that canyon. The man who replaced him knows that tears are not weakness but proof of love." "Good." Kate's arm tightened around him. "Because I need that man. Our children need him. The world needs more men who are not afraid to cry, to feel, to love openly." They drifted to sleep wrapped around each other. Two souls who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built a love that would last the rest of their lives. Years continued to pass with the steady rhythm of seasons. Henry married a kind woman named Margaret and opened not just one but 3 additional stores across Texas. Sarah defied expectations by becoming a teacher and then a school administrator, advocating for girls' education throughout the state. She married late, at 28, to a lawyer who respected her independence and intelligence. Wade and Kate became grandparents 5 times over, their home frequently filled with the chaos and joy of grandchildren. Wade discovered that being a grandfather was even better than being a father, because he got all the love and play without quite as much responsibility. He carved toys for each grandchild, taught them to ride horses, told them stories about the old Wild West days. His favorite story to tell, though he only shared it when the children were old enough to understand, was about the day he found their grandmother bleeding in a canyon and discovered what it meant to truly love someone. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Wade surprised Kate with a trip to the coast. She had never forgotten her childhood dream of seeing the ocean, and he had been planning this journey for over a year, arranging everything in secret. When Kate stood on the beach for the first time, feeling the salt spray on her face and hearing the roar of the waves, tears streamed down her cheeks. Wade stood beside her, his arm around her waist, crying right along with her because her joy was his joy. Her dreams fulfilled were his dreams realized. "Thank you," Kate whispered, leaning into him. "Thank you for remembering. Thank you for making my dreams come true." "You made all my dreams come true first," Wade replied. "Dreams I did not even know I had until I found you. This is just a small payment on a debt I will never be able to fully repay." They spent 3 days by the ocean, walking the beaches, collecting shells, watching the sunrise and sunset over the water. It was a stolen moment out of time, just the two of them without responsibilities or obligations, simply enjoying being together. On the last evening, as they sat on the sand watching the waves roll in endlessly, Kate spoke about the future. "I know we cannot live forever, Wade. Someday one of us will leave the other behind. I hate thinking about it, but I need you to promise me something." Wade's hand tightened on hers. "What? If I go first, promise me you will not shut down again. Promise me you will let the children and grandchildren love you, that you will cry at my funeral because crying means I mattered, that you will keep living fully even without me." Kate turned to look at him, her green eyes serious in the fading light. "Kate, promise me, Wade. Because if you go first, I promise you the same. We taught each other how to love deeply, how to feel everything fully. That does not stop just because one of us is gone. Our love is strong enough to last beyond death." Wade pulled her close, his heart aching at the thought of a world without Kate in it. But she was right. They had to acknowledge the reality that their time was limited, that aging was not something they could stop. "I promise. If you go first, I will grieve loudly and openly, and then I will keep living the way you taught me to live, fully, feeling everything, loving our family with my whole heart." He paused, then continued, "But Kate, I need you to know that if that day comes, a part of me will die with you. The best part of me is the part you created." "No." Kate's voice was firm. "The best part of you was always there. I just helped you find it. And that part will live on in our children, in our grandchildren, in every person whose life we have touched. Love does not die just because the lover does." They sat together as the stars emerged, holding each other and making peace with the inevitable end that awaited all mortals. But that end was still many years away. Wade lived to see his children become grandparents themselves, making him a great-grandfather at 72. Kate remained by his side through all of it, still running the general store well into her 60s, though she eventually turned most of the daily operations over to Henry. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by 4 generations of family in the home Wade had built so many years ago. The party spilled out into the yard, with children running everywhere and tables laden with food and drink. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the celebration, Wade stood with Kate under the stars. 50 years, Kate marveled. Half a century since you found me bleeding and cried for me. Best decision I ever made, crying for you." Wade smiled, his face deeply lined now, but his eyes still that same piercing gray. "Changed the entire course of my life. Changed both our lives." Kate leaned into him, and he supported her weight easily despite his own age. They had weathered life's storms together and emerged stronger for it. Around them, their family laughed and celebrated. Henry was there with Margaret and their 3 children, all grown now with families of their own. Sarah had brought her husband and their 2 daughters, along with Sarah's first grandchild, a baby girl named Catherine after her great-grandmother. As Wade looked around at this legacy of love, at the family that had grown from that desperate moment in a canyon 50 years ago, gratitude overwhelmed him. Tears slipped down his weathered cheeks, and he did not bother to wipe them away. Kate noticed, of course. She always noticed. Happy tears. "The happiest." Wade kissed her temple, a gesture as natural to him as breathing after all these years. "I am just thinking about that hard cowboy who thought crying was weakness. How wrong he was. These tears are my strength, Kate. They are proof that I loved you for 50 years, and I will love you for however many more we have left." "Forever," Kate said firmly. "Even beyond that. Our love does not have an ending, Wade. It just keeps growing and changing, living on in all these people we created and raised and loved." The party continued late into the night, and for once neither Wade nor Kate worried about being tired or needing rest. They danced together under the stars, moving slowly and carefully, but still perfectly in sync. Their family watched with affection and respect, understanding that they were witnessing something rare and precious. When they finally retired to bed in the early hours of the morning, exhausted but happy, Wade held Kate close and thought about all the years behind them and whatever years remained ahead. He thought about the hard cowboy who never cried, and how that man had died the moment he saw Kate bleeding in that canyon. And he was grateful, so incredibly grateful that fate or chance or divine providence had led him to that exact spot at that exact moment. Because finding Kate had been finding himself. Loving her had taught him how to be fully human, and their life together had been the greatest adventure he could have ever imagined. "I love you," he whispered into the darkness, "more now than ever." Kate's hand found his, their fingers intertwining automatically. "I love you too, my hard cowboy who learned to cry. My Wade." They fell asleep that way, holding each other close, hearts beating in synchrony. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and built a love that would echo through generations. Outside, the Texas night was peaceful, the stars bright overhead, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called to the moon. The hard cowboy who never cried had become a man who cried freely and loved deeply, and in doing so had lived a life of profound meaning and joy. It was more than enough. It was everything.